Dr. Anabela Cardoso. Now, I have followed Anabela's work for more than 20 years. Anabela, you are my hero. I don't know if you realize that, but we have,
Oh, no, not really. No.
followed your work for so long. Anabela is a Portuguese career diplomat since 1976, very highly qualified, has amazing experiences, and she's been involved in ITC and she started out with EVP and ITC since 1997, and more than as just being an experimenter, which is wonderful, and she's had wonderful experiences, she's also done an amazing amount for the field. In 2000, she started the ITC Journal. In 2005, she started the ITC Research Center, and she knows everybody who's anybody in the European ITC scene. She's friends with Maggie and Jules Harsh-Fishbach, Adolf Holmes, Marcello Bacci, people that we can only read about. These are people that she knew really well. She knew Dr. David Fontana very well. In 2007, she received some research grants, and she did some wonderful research with experimenters who are pro-ITC. I don't even know where to start with you, Anabela. You have done so many wonderful things. So,
thank you, Wendy. Thank you so much. Too much. You say too much. No, well, it was work, but I did what I could, as David used to see. That's what David used to see. Now that you mentioned David Fontana, he used to say, I do what I can. So that's what I did. I did what I could, fortunately. And I was able to do some things for ITC, especially that very serious, totally controlled to the highest possible degree available in our time of those experiments at the Laboratory of Acoustics at the School of Engineering here in Vigo University. So that was a study that took 2 years, and we recorded with all kinds of, the equipment belonged to the university. That is important, very important, I think. And we did obtain voices under practically all conditions. That's a long report. It's some 25 pages or so. So I couldn't certainly go over it right here, but it's published in Neuroquantology in 2012, September, in the September issue. So it's easy to find. It was a lot of work and very valuable, because one of the few conclusions, unfortunately, this is such an elusive field, I would say, call it this way, that there is, unfortunately, because it has been going on since Friedrich Jürgensen in 1959 until today, 2019, and there are no certainties. And this is very important, I think. Of course, it's an area from its very nature, there can be no certainties, is it? But one of the things that we know is that the voices are transformed noise. I mean, the communicators modulate noise, environmental noise, to produce human voices. So if you have available a noise carrier, whatever it is, I do not use human voices in opposition to other transcommunicators, for the simple reason that I think if you use a substract of human voices to record, nobody is going to believe you that there is an anomalous voice in the middle of dozens of other voices, isn't it? So I have never used that, except in these experiments. Among all other kinds of carriers, we also used an informal conversation where we had top quality voices, just like my voice here, or more if possible. So, but no, I never use it in my own work, and none of my published recordings were obtained through the use of human voices. I use, they happen to be state frequencies. It means my radios, I have 5, they are tuned to frequencies that are used by the state only for emergency situations. What does this mean? It means that there are no radio emissions in state emergency frequencies, as you can imagine. And this is what I use for my recordings, and the voices come through this. Now it's only one radio. In former times, the voices would start in one, jump to the other, and to the other, all tuned in, all state frequencies, but all different. Now, when I receive the direct radio voices, not so frequently as before, I must say, but they come normally through one radio. I do receive them, but not with the amazing frequency when I started, that I used to have voices to experiment. Of course, to have voices, you have to experiment naturally, but practically every day, and long voices and very, very loud. You could hear them in my garden. And my studio is right here, like, well, the little room beside this office where I am staying. So this is, as I said, a very complex field. Complex because unfortunately we cannot understand it well yet. We do not know where these voices come from. All theories are good, like because it's the mediumistic capacities, whatever, or it's whatever. None is proven. And this is what I think is very important, except that environmental noise is transformed by the communicators to produce human voice-like sounds. And then you can have a dialogue. In the case of the direct radio voices, let me stop here and say there are 2 kinds of voices. What we call in transcommunication the EVP voices. These were the first voices received by Friedrich Jürgensen in Sweden, and then Dr. Konstantin Raudive in Germany, and in his famous experiments in England before the publication of Breakthrough also. His book, very, very good book, excellent book, perhaps one of the best ever written in the field of ITC, Dr. Konstantin Raudive's Breakthrough. Since this time until now, we are in 2019, we have gone through Marcello Bacci, as you said, Wendy, who started in, well, he met Jürgensen, so he told me. He met Jürgensen, and this must have been, he must have started in the 70s, I think 71, 72, to go to speak here only about the most remarkable ones. Then we had 1 or 2 other people in Italy, Raffaella Gremese, although she was more for images. We had Gabriella Alvisi with few books published, 2 or 3, I think. We had Hildgard Schäfer in Germany, very good transcommunicator. But so far, we are, with the exception of Baci, we are speaking of EVP. That's how I started. This means the voices that you cannot hear while they are being produced. You can only hear them when you rewind your means of recording, be it a computer, be a tape recorder, or one of these small ones, a dictation, whatever they are called, one of these small things that to dictate, whatever. When you rewind is when you hear the voice. Before, you don't hear nothing. These are called the electronic voice phenomena from the time of Konstantin Raudiva. The other ones that started with Jurgensen, because his communicators, Friedrich Jurgensen's communicators, were the ones who told him for the first time. Indeed, there was not many people before, except Attila von Sley in the United States, but this is short and small things. There was a medium involved, and Raymond Bayless, and so on, different type of experiments, although they had voices, but they were not controlled to this point, and they were not systematic, and that is a very important thing. But Friedrich Jurgensen was told by his communicators, use the radio. And he received voices directly from the loudspeaker of a radio, Jurgensen. But he could not get into a dialogue. And the dialogue is what Marcello Baci did, is what I do when I can, and it's what, of course, Adolf Holmes and Maggie Harsch-Fischbach also did. The Harsch-Fischbach is a special case. They are a special case. Why? Because his set of equipment was directed by a personality, entity, let's call it this way, an entity from another dimension whom they called the technician. People who are into the field of ITC know this famous being that the operators here, the Harsch-Fischbach, in this case in Luxembourg, called the technician, because they wanted to give it, I would say, a name, and it said, or he or she, whatever, said, names here are unimportant, but you can call me the archivist or the technician, one of these, the bibliothecary, is it? Of the bibliothèque, the bibliothecary, so they called him the technician. Anyway, this high being from another dimension instructed the Harsch-Fischbach on how to build their equipment. Some was built, some was bought, but it was always arranged directly under the instructions of the technician. And I am very fortunate because I've been a very good friend with Professor Ernst Senkowski, deceased a couple of years ago. And I know I have all this information through Ernst Senkowski, who stayed here in my house. We were constantly in touch. And so I know so many little details of what happened in Luxembourg, the extraordinary case of Luxembourg, like the golden age of ITC. And then also Adolf Holmes, deceased, whom I never met. He died. I know a lot about Adolf Holmes, again, through Ernst Senkowski. But he died in the 90s, I think. Adolf Holmes, perhaps even before I started my own experiments. Perhaps, I think so. And I also know about him, and I have made my last book. I will show it to you, based principally here. Based. I hope you can hear and see me. Based principally on Adolf Holmes' communications, which provided information of an amazing nature. It's not all there, of course. It's all compiled by Professor Stankowski. It's not all in my book. It was already a big effort to translate it from German and from Italian, because the only translation that exists is in Italian. So then I wrote it in English, and it cost me because it's difficult. And besides, the language is extremely elaborate. But these were not, with some exceptions, mainly direct radio voices, not really. And Adolf Holmes' voices were not that good. Not that good. They were good, and of course you could understand them, but not like the Harsch-Fischbach. But what he received, Adolf Holmes, were the hundreds of computer texts, anomalous computer texts, which appeared on the screen of his computer or in his hard disk. Adolf Holmes was a carpenter, a modest carpenter, and he couldn't understand what it meant, the things that appeared on his computer screen. So we used to ask Professor Stankowski to help him with that. What does this mean? And I have read a lot, not all of them, because they are in German, and I know very little German. I know much more Italian. I have done it through Italian mostly. But this last book of mine, this Electronic Contact with the Dead, What Do the Voices Tell Us? I did it exactly about Adolf Holmes, because what he received as information is so extremely important, and it's not known at all, I would say, at all, in English. So that's the reason why I, with great a lot of work, put it into English. Not all, as I said, but a lot about it. The main points, what I consider the main points: suffering, reincarnation. So I can't remember now, but the main points, that the nature of the next world and so on. And what else was I going to say? About the direct radio voices. I also get direct radio voices. I could try to make you listen to my first direct radio voice, but I do not know if, which is quite long and quite powerful, but I do not know if you can hear it. Otherwise you don't, you leave this lecture or whatever you want to call it about ITC, you have not heard a voice. That's not very nice, I would say. Anyway, we can try here to open the folder that I have here in my computer. I also have this CD. Before I do that, when I published this first book, which you probably have seen, I don't know, to corroborate what I say here, and this is really the story of what happened to me personally, and my own communications. This is about my own communications. I published with it, although separate from it, because the publisher did not want to see these with books, so he didn't publish it. I had to publish it separately. And so I published a sample of the points that I touched in that book. And this is the CD, which is...
CD available?
Oh, I can send it to you. It's a pleasure for me. But it is available here. www.itcjournal.org. O-R-G. Can you see it at the bottom?
Yes, yeah, I can see it.
Yeah? Here, you can order it at the ITC Journal website.
Thank you.
But now I will try to show you. Let's see.
Okay. So
If it goes well, this was for Barcelona in Nina also, but well, I already had them in my computer. If you have not listened to them, it's okay. This one says, they are all originals. This one says, doggy. And it was spontaneous. I was getting out of my studio and let me put this. You see my umbrellas?
Yes.
So you see the audio now?
Yes.
You will hear?
Let's
you think?
Try.
Right.
Okay. So I'm getting out of the studio with my big dog Negrito. And I say, let's go, Negrito, let's go, because he was big, getting old and slow. And the voice says, doggy. Just after we are leaving, I suppose. I could only, as I said, this is an EVP. You don't hear anything. It's only when you listen to it. Sai, Negrito, sai, vamos, vamos.
Oh, yes.
Did you?
Yes, very clear. Once again,
Yeah,
please.
no.
Play again.
Play again. Here, I'm not here. This is doggy. Yeah. No. Okay. Let's see. No, why not? Ah, gosh. Groove music. Must be this groove music. Okay, I'll play it again. Yeah. Sai, Negrito, sai, vamos, vamos. Yeah?
Yes.
Yes, you did. Yes?
Yep.
Okay. You could hear it well, yes?
Yes, we could.
Very clear.
Okay. Doggy. And another EVP, I like it so much because it's also about another dog. I was preparing my equipment in my studio. You can hear me kind of walking, and I was alone, perhaps with my Nina. Yes, my little Nina. My little small doggy, Nina. And the voice in the middle of the noises that I make in my studio, setting up my equipment, this voice says something very incredible. Natal, in 3 languages. Natal, which is Christmas in Portuguese. Beso, a kiss in Spanish. For English, Nina. And all this happened. I didn't hear anything, as I say again. When I listened to what I had recorded, then this voice was there. Yes? No.
Yes,
You didn't hear
it. We could hear it, but it wasn't as clear.
No, because there are the noises that I make, you know.
Yes, yes.
There are the noises that I make. So, but if you play this, I think it's beautiful because it sends a kiss to Nina. And I continue, see, all these are originals. So, of course, I didn't take out any noises or anything. But this is again what I said. The voices need environmental noise to construct themselves. What was the environmental noise in this case? There was no noise except I moving around the room to set up the equipment. And that's perhaps what the voice used to produce this Natal um beijo for Nina. Because there was no other noise. The radios were not turned on. I had no what we call background support noise, which is what transcommunicators use in their experiments, this area, acoustic carrier, nothing. I was just organizing things. But there was noise in the room, and the voice appeared recorded. I will only make you listen to the first direct radio voice. The first. I also have here David Fontana, but I'll play that later if you wish. This was a protocol that David did without telling me. He didn't tell me anything in advance. And he was here, and we were in my studio, really. I was in my studio, and David came next to me, and he started speaking to the communicators. And I didn't expect him to do that. He didn't pick up the microphone because I had the microphone. So David just spoke loudly and said, "Ridu tempo, can you say how are you?" And I was terrified. I assure you that I was terrified because, well, he asked them to repeat a sentence after him. I was not expecting it, of course, he didn't tell me. And what came to my head was, what if they do not repeat? Because we do not command the voices at all. I do not command them for sure. So I said, oh my goodness, what if they don't repeat what he's asking them to repeat? But they did repeat. And then I was extremely happy and shouted, and because, well, this is something David asking without a transmitter, very important, of course. And the anomalous voice replied what he had asked them to do, to repeat, how are you? And they repeated. But I will show you my first direct radio voice with Carlos de Almeida, my main communicator. And here I was experimenting for EVP, which is, you see it in your room. In this case, I have a big house, and I can spare a room, a small room, and I have set up my equipment there, and that's where I experiment. So I was experimenting for EVP. That is, you speak, sit down on the floor. I always sit on the floor anyway, everywhere. Not everywhere, not in fashionable places, but at home I do. So, and I was experimenting for EVP. That is, you speak to communicators that you suppose can hear you, but you can never see, and you can never hear, because you only hear them when you rewind. So here again I was asking, I think, because I was getting so many and so powerful EVP voices, that I asked, are we because we were a small group of 3 people at the beginning. Then it was only I who stayed, but at this time we were 3. And I said, are we really in contact with some station? Of course I knew about the stations. Everybody who is interested in transcommunication knows about the stations. Already Jorgensen in 1960s had a station that, had the announcement of the existence of a station. So I asked this, and then this voice started speaking to me, and I was so scared. I have to tell you, I was so extremely scared that I do not know how I could hold on until it finished, because I felt like fainting right there. I'm not a person used to the paranormal or used to, not really, no, not at all. I am now because of what happened to me, but not before. I had no experience whatsoever of any anomalies, how it is said these days, or anomalies. No, nothing. When I started experimenting, and then these things started happening to me. But when I heard this voice speaking to me from the radio, I almost died. I almost did. I guarantee I couldn't sleep for 3 or 4 nights.
Estamos comunicando com o grupo Landel e com Carlos de Almeida. Pergunta. Como? Sim? Não ouço!
Of course you cannot understand, because this is Portuguese. But he said he started, I asked, are we in touch with Carlos de Almeida, whom I knew was in Rio do Tempo Station, and Father Landel, who is a Brazilian priest who died many years ago. I do not know the dates, but maybe middle of the 20th century or so. And so are we really in touch with these people because of the so many VPs that we had, and I particularly had? So this voice started replying to me, and at the end he said, in Portuguese, of course, and at the end he says, isto é muito e muito difícil. This is very difficult. I had to lower my voice, not in this is the original, but I started shouting so much because I got so nervous. Then in the audio here, with the sound editing software, I lowered my voice so that you could hear the voice, the anomalous voice, better. Because I shouted so much, being so nervous, that I started shouting. And he says, I said, no, I cannot hear. I meant I cannot understand. But I said, I cannot hear. And the voice said, outro mundo, another world. So this was the first direct radio voice I received. I can't see you now, Wendy.
We're still here. You're sharing your screen. Do you want to share any more sounds? Otherwise, we can stop you sharing.
As you wish. For me, I'm here to do.
Let's hear the one with David
Do the one with
Fontana.
David Fontana.
Yeah, let's hear David Fontana one.
Well, remember, first of all, one has to be very, how do I say, focused, isn't it?
We understand.
But remember that David had no microphone. He came into the studio, I had the microphone. Mm-hmm. And he started speaking without microphone. So his first voice is very, very low. When he asks for the first time, Rio do Tempo, can you say, how are you? And then they replied and said, how are you? And I said, you have no microphone. So I passed the microphone to him, and he again made the request, and they again replied. So.
We are so pleased that you're speaking. Continue. We want to speak to Anabela now. Yes.
Could you hear, how are you?
Yes, we
Yes.
could.
Yeah, the repetition
Yes.
Yes.
by the voices.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Well, you could hear it well.
Yeah.
Or not.
Yes, we could hear it well.
Good. Okay.
All right, we're going to
So-
stop sharing now, and you can see us. And
Yes.
see you. We're all here.
Okay. Great. So now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So my question is, you said that in the beginning that it's still very much in the realm of theory. And what would it take?
Sorry. No, theory. Yeah, of course. How can it be otherwise if we do not know how the voices are produced?
Exactly. So my question is, what would it take to move it from theory to undeniable proof?
What I did at the Laboratory of Acoustics at the School of Engineering in a university. That is done. It's done now.
A repeated successful experiment.
Well, that is done. I mean, these experiments are done. They are published. There were several operators, not only I, other operators who came from other places, with one of the greatest acoustic experts in Europe, Philip Newell, who happens to live here. Not here in my house, but near. And Philip is one of these famous acoustic technicians, and he was there during the experiments from the beginning to the end. He supervised all the setting up of the equipment that belonged to the university, and as I already said, and we recorded with all different kinds of microphones, all different kinds of computers, analog, digital, whatever. We informal conversations. That was one idea I had. I said, of course, this is not controlled, but we know what is our voices and what are not. Anyway, Raudiva's experiments in England were done with informal conversations. Sorry?
Anabela, I understand from what you've said that it was theory until such as you were able to repeat the experiments with other people present.
Yes, Karen. Yeah, well, the thing is, I was not the only one able to repeat the experiments because the experiments are repeated every day. There are thousands of ITC operators in the world. Yes. Some more successful than others, but many have voices. Many. Yep. And it's many.
I think what August is saying is that although we know the voices come, what we don't know is where they come from. Are they coming from the afterlife? Are they coming from another dimension? there's obviously an intelligence behind them. What are your thoughts on where the voices come from?
You see, Wendy, the voices say repeatedly, and I have thousands of voices, as you can imagine. For instance, there is one here in this folder that says that very clearly. I am uncle, so Tio is uncle. Michael, Cardoso, morto, dead. And I am the father. I am Luis Cardoso, my brother, who died a few years ago, very young, well, 40 something. And I'm your grandmother, speaking to you from another dimension. So we are the dead. I mean, I must have recorded, we are the dead. I don't want to exaggerate, but if I did not record it 500 times, I did not record it. 500, maybe, or more. Mm-hmm. So they tell us that. Now, if we want to say, oh, I don't believe it's the dead, I think it's the extraterrestrial. So you're free to say whatever you wish. What we cannot prove, and that is the point, my own experiments published in Neuroquantology, their great advantage was the highly controlled conditions. Mm-hmm. That's the greatest and perhaps the only. They could not have been more controlled. That's all.
That's wonderful.
Yeah? That is what is important in these experiments. Great. That I managed to do and to publish. Again, to publish was not easy at all. It was extremely difficult because not even parapsychologists accept ITC easily, as perhaps some of you know. Anyway, what is not possible to prove, for its very nature, is the origin of the voices. How are you going to prove that they say they are the dead? But how do you prove they are the dead? They say, isn't it? They say. What did you say, sorry?
If someone came through, like your uncle Michael, and he said his name and his relationship to you,
yes,
you know him to be dead, then that's proof that it's coming from the afterlife.
Karen, it's proof, of course, and my father,
yes,
calling me my name, my own name, they call me Bella, not Anabela. My family has always called me Bella.
Yeah.
So my father, my brother, my grandmother, my another uncle, my another grandfather, so many grandfathers, my mother, they all say their names, and they all say, they are dead. Mm-hmm. That is proof for you and for me.
Yeah.
That's not scientific proof.
Exactly. August, did you
get your question
answered?
That's what I mean, you know. Sorry?
Well, sort of. It makes me want to comment that my understanding and my own experience is that they will try to use words that we use and understand, even though they may no longer use that form of communication. And what they're really trying to transmit are vibrations of emotion. So we may not be able to prove that the words they're saying are accurate or where they're coming from, but we can be sure of the emotion of how it makes us feel. And that's my own work as a therapist, is I work with a lot of emotion and feelings, and it's the feeling that they transmit to us that's beneath the word that is the true communication, at least for me.
Yes, I totally agree. I really couldn't agree more, because the most impacting thing in this process is the emotion. Exactly. But that's again subjective proof, isn't it?
Right, it's internal proof and not external proof.
Internal and personal. And you go and tell Stephen Hawking that speak to you through a radio, and you'll see he doesn't say anything now, apparently, but what he would reply. Yeah, this is what I mean. This is always my point, you know. If you go to the spiritualist circles, spiritist, whatever, all these circles in this area, oh, they, of course, for them is proof. For science, it is not. And this is the sad thing. And this is what we need, what I very much would like to overcome. And I've done what I could. And it was this, but, you know, did I convince the Orthodox and non-Orthodox? They just don't accept it. That's it. They don't accept it. What can I say? They don't accept it. No more. Can't say anymore. This says it all. I suppose they don't want to accept it. But we of course they don't want, because if they wanted to accept it, they would at least study the evidence, isn't it? They would study the evidence.
Yes.
They would come and be there in the laboratory of acoustics of the School of Engineering and saying, let's see, I am a physicist. This was highly announced and advertised. Did one come? Not one. Of course, it's Philip Newell, who is a skeptic and is a highly regarded sound technician, one of the best in the world, and so on and so on. But real science, they are not interested in knowing.
Yeah, I don't believe that they're really scientists in that way, that they are afraid.
That's true.
And they're afraid of stigmatizing, and
they are. And losing their grants, of course,
Yeah, so science must be done without fear.
It must, real, true science. But that's the science we have, unfortunately. I'm a great admirer of Friedrich Jürgensen. And he published this radio contacts, voice transmission, radio transmissions with the dead or something. Can't remember the name. I have the book there that the Jürgensen Foundation very kindly offered me. But I'm a great admirer of Friedrich Jürgensen, who was one of the top European personalities of his time. He had meetings, personal and private meetings with the Pope. Yeah, you know, he was granted a high order of the Vatican. So Friedrich Jürgensen did the impossible to get the scientists of his time. We are speaking of the mid 20th century, involved and investigated the phenomenon. And he did it succeed? If he had succeeded, everything would be now in order, isn't it? I wouldn't have to have done those experiments at the Laboratory of Acoustics. But it is not yet at that point. Will it ever come?
What are your thoughts on recording residual EVPs from a location? Have you ever done that? Something that's not currently intelligent, you know, an echo from the past. I've gotten those before. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I have not recorded that because, you know why? Because perhaps I've never experimented with within that scope. Because if I understand what you are saying, you go, like, say, to famous ruins or non-famous, doesn't matter. Ruins, old buildings, and so on. And you leave an open micro and record, is it?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
No,
Yes.
I have not done that. When I record, and I have recorded in other places besides my studio and besides the Laboratory of Acoustics and the professional recording studio that we rented in Vigo for the another set of recordings. This took 2 years, but I always speak. You see, I have never done what you are saying, which is to leave an open microphone wherever, isn't it? What you are asking me.
Yes,
So,
yes. I've gotten some in historic places here, and it'll be
yeah.
something related to an event in the past. It wasn't.
I know people, yeah.
So we wonder where those are imprinted in the environment that we could still pick those up. That's what we often ponder.
That's one of the theories about those voices. Yeah, could be the shrieks and this anguish cries and so on. Is it this type of thing?
Yes.
Yeah, I have never done that. No, I have, because I've never recorded with an open microphone. What I have done, and used to do it with David and other people, but with David also, is that leave a recorder on one of these portable recorders, and be having that lunch or dinner or tea or whatever, and having a conversation, and leave the recorder on. And on many occasions, or with my friend Carlos Fernandez also, who worked here with me from the beginning, and voices would appear and comment on what we were saying.
Yeah, Anabela, what about Spiricom and Hans Otto Koenig's devices? What do you know about the devices that people have developed? And there's an Edison device that the Skoll group used, and they recorded voices. Do you know anything about those?
I know about them, but I have no direct experience.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the Spiricom, we all know the ghost of, how is it? The Ghost of 29 Megacycles, is it? By John Fuller?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Isn't it? The famous book about George Mick and the Spiricom. So I'm absolutely convinced. As a matter of fact, I have the Spiricom voices somewhere in my computer. Somebody gave them to me, but I was not there. I think the Spiricom voices are absolutely true. Maybe not the replications later on by other people. Those I would very much doubt. But the initial ones, yes. And about the other devices that you mentioned, yes, I know them, but I have not used them. I never used any of those devices. I had a friend in France, and she used to record with one of these noise generators. Are they called by Hans Otto Koenig? Are they called generators, something? Yeah,
that's his device.
Yeah, so she recorded with those, and she would come to me to show me what she had recorded. And at a certain point, she was French, and at a certain point, she recorded beautiful voice, soft but beautiful, because that what I heard, not directly with Hans Koenig, but from my friend, the French lady, the sound was soft. The sound of the machine is soft. So it's not harsh like the radios that you heard in my recording of the first direct radio voice. The soft sound. So the voice was also soft, naturally. And it said in French, the voice said, fleuve du temps, like this, only this, fleuve du temps. This means Rio do Tempo. Fleuve, Rio, du temps. Fleuve du temps, said the voice. Why? Because she was speaking with me almost every day. I do not know the reason, but I heard this voice. It was beautiful and it was clear, and it said, Fleuve du temps. And that's the only time I heard voices recorded by the Hans-Otto Koenig's generator.
Anabela, let me come in here because we're running out of time. First of all, the direct radio voice seems to be mostly in Europe. Do you know of anyone in America getting direct radio voices?
Not really.
And is there any advice you'd give to people who want to experiment with it?
With the direct radio? Yeah. Lots of advice I would give. First of all is to read the literature, to be informed.
Yes.
It is important to be informed, whatever field you want to explore, isn't it? Be it chemistry, mathematics, literature, ITC, you must be informed. So get the most of information that you are able to, and then experiment seriously. Seriously. Not just to get voices. What is that thing of getting voices? You know? So many people get voices. They don't know why, what they are for, or where they come from, of course. They all say it's the dead, but do they really know? And so experiment seriously, persistently, with perseverance, systematically, regularly, and do not use human voices as support. Otherwise, you can, and you will get voices. But it's such a big confusion that pareidolia is assured. So experiment with a safe source of noise, a good acoustic carrier. Voices are much more difficult to come through, like for instance I do with the radio tuned in frequencies where there are never ever voices, as I explained at the beginning, but they are safer. You know they are real anomalous voices, don't you?
Yes.
Because
now, Anabela, let me break in there.
Sorry?
I'd like to introduce you to Luis Sergio Marotta. Luis Sergio's in Brazil, and he is on Kardec Radio, and I'm sure he's got some questions for you. One of the things we talk about with Luis Sergio is the fact that the morality, what do we learn anything from ITC about living a more moral and spiritual life? Let me put you on to Luis Sergio, because I know that's something that he's very concerned about. Luis Sergio, there we go.
I can't see him. Can I? No, I can't. Okay. Doesn't matter. You can. What's up? Hello.
Nice to meet you, Anabela.
Nice to meet you. I can't see you, but that's fine.
He will when he keeps talking. Keep talking, Luis Sergio.
All right. Okay. Now, first and foremost, I'd like to congratulate you, Anabela. I've heard something about you in a documentary by Keith Parsons.
Yeah.
And he interviewed you in Portugal, right? In Portugal.
No, right here. Right here in this house. Yes, he came here.
Yeah, really? Good. Yes, I think so. He interviewed you, and I published his documentary on my channel, Spirit Connections. And first, before the question about the ethics, one question I'd like to ask you that it's a doubt many people ask me about ITC is, do you think your presence is needed, is necessary whenever the experiment is successful? For example, because many people has a suspicion that ITC works a lot because the person who is dealing with the equipment is a sort of ectoplasmic medium, and it helps the spirit team to make things happen. Do you think this is there is some fundament in this kind of doubt? For example, whenever the experiment happens, you are present, or when you are not present, does it happen the same way? What do you think?
Well, I think so many things about that. But you see, in my first book, there are so many descriptions there. If you read it, you will see. The first one, not the last one, what's the name? I'm so tired. That is our electronic voices contact with another dimension. Okay. Once David Fontana asked me to ask my communicators why some people get results and other people do not. That goes to your point, isn't it? Yeah? Yeah. And I did ask. And they replied, it depends on us. Yeah? What does it depend on? It depends on them, they said. On us, they said. Okay, so that was a loud, recorded voice upon request of the EVIDs. Now, presence or not presence, well, of course, as the therapist, wasn't it? One of the guests was a therapist.
Yes.
He spoke with me.
Yes.
Very, yes, August, very wisely, I think. As he said, even if you, well, I have so many voices, but when I was there, when I was not there, when I was there, and I went downstairs to the kitchen to feed a little abandoned dog that, Kokish, her name was, that I had rescued. And so I say, hola, Koki. I was in the kitchen. I left the recorder recording. And this voice, beautiful voice says, hola, hello, all there, for instance. And I was in the kitchen. I used to leave my radios on, not anymore, but yes, sometimes yes also. Night and day, not 10 days in a row, as I used to do before, upon request of my communicators, but I leave them on one day and one night. And I turn them off when they tell me that I should turn them off. Speaking or not speaking, mind you. Speaking or not speaking. Voices or no voices. So because they say we need to work, so leave them on. So I leave them on. When I come back around normally 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, I say, may I turn off the radios? Yes, you may now. Okay, I turn. There were no voices whatsoever. But they say we are working. We want to be able to speak to everybody in your world, my world, interested in our world. This is what we do. So, very good. As I said, there must be this, the experimenter is there or is not there, doesn't really matter. What matters, as August was his name, the therapist's name, the emotion, the motivation is the key factor.
The key factor. Okay. Thank you very much for your explanation. And just
medium
a little second.
We do not know what mediums are. Yes, please. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Now, just to get a hook with what Wendy had said, I don't know if there's time, but it's about this thing. For example, do they give you the spirit teams and your people? Do they give you any kind of advice about your life, for example? Or they limited their conversation to technical things or verifiable information?
It's not friable ever, the information. Read my second book and you will see that that is everything but friable at all. The Arstichbach communications and
verifiable information, okay? Not
friable. Fiable, yes.
Verifiable.
Yes, the information is always fiable. I never had one lie in my information. Thousands of communications. And now, of high ethical character, of course, it's all of high ethical character. Person life guidance. I do not ask for personal life guidance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they are oracles, or I don't think so. So I don't do that. I've never done it. I have never done it. Yeah.
Thank you.
But
Thank you for your answer.
the highest level of information came through the Hartfischbach and Adolf Holmes in Luxembourg and Germany, respectively. My own also, but I cannot put myself at the level of the Hartfischbach or Adolf Holmes, because it's not correct. So there you have information about everything in life and how we should live our life in simple ways that you would like to know about. Unfortunately, that's the reason why I have tried so much to publish in English and have translated so much from other languages, also for the ITC Journal, because unfortunately, none of this is published in English. The Hartfischbach book is in German, and then it is translated into Portuguese. It's translated, I don't know in which other language, must be some other languages, not in English. Adolf Holmes, it's all German, and I've translated not all, some of it into this last book. And Paci is published in Italian. It's not translated at all. So that's what I can say, unfortunately. And that's one of the reasons why the English-speaking people do not know much about it. Mm-hmm. Because they are in German, in Swedish, in Italian, and not in English. Yeah? In French, François Brun is all his wonderful books, but very particularly Les Morts nous parlent, The Dead Speak to Us, his bestseller, François Brun's book. Also, François Brun is not translated, as you know, and he's a great theologian. He's one of the heralds of ITC in the world. He was throughout his life, and he was everywhere. He was in Luxembourg, he was in Germany, he was everywhere. With Rémy Chauvin, a professor of Sorbonne, you can't get much higher than the Sorbonne Cathedral. So Rémy Chauvin wrote a book with François Brun on ITC, and this is not translated.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. And I think there's more to that than we may imagine, because there are problems of what we call egregora. I don't know if this expression is well known in the spiritualism, but because we need to get in touch with the spirit teams of other realms, of other countries, other cultures. Each culture has some kind of permission, for example, to get some, not permission, but for example, I was talking once to a spirit from England, and he said to me, look, okay, but in my country, there is a kind of filter, and we need to filter things, and things can go slowly, drop by drop, in that field you want to talk about. In other fields, it's the opposite. Here in your country, we need to go drop by drop, and there we can advance more. So I understand this, and I don't know if this is what happens. But of course, there is cultural obstacles also, which demands for us to have more motivation to make translations on that language from French to English, for example. I think Allan Kardec's case is one example of that. And for example, Allan Kardec's Review magazine, it's hundreds and hundreds of pages that haven't been translated to English yet, right? And I understand Anabela, maybe her kind of her eagerness to do this, and I think it's possible now, because there are people like our friend from I forgot the acronym, IREI. IREI, that's it. someone like that, like, for example, Vanessa Anceloni from Cardiac Radio, people, they start translating books related to issue. I myself, I'm a very friend of a friend of mine called Geraldo. He was a biographer of Chico Xavier. He is a biographer of Chico Xavier, a friend of mine. And he has a publishing house in Belo Horizonte. We could talk about, but in Portuguese you already have. Yeah. So I think it's important. Well, that's why we have a channel called Spirit Connections, not a very well-known channel, but I'll go on. I go on uploading material that's speaking in Portuguese with English subtitles, and the other way around too, vice versa, right? So that people all over the world start getting in touch with people like you all here have been doing, right? Because I know the world is still very hesitating in terms of receiving this kind of message. We are tackling issues that sometimes are make people upset, or people don't want to talk about this, but something that's so natural. We've been learning that this is life. And one day, when the world comes to the conclusion that you don't need to be afraid of that kind of knowledge, things can change a lot, because that's what the world is in need nowadays, right? So that's the world is going to go on, and I think your English translation will come up easier soon.
That's the unknown, of course. Well, we don't know. I certainly do not know, Wendy. Not at all. I think is that the communicators, I have to say that I am from a skeptic that I was throughout my life, until I got this experience with ITC. I am converted, between commas, inverted commas, to the belief in an afterlife. And I think that these communicators really exist. I needed ITC though, because I'm still skeptic. I am, by education, a rationalist. I am rational. I'm not esoteric. Anyway, I think now that I really think so, but I needed ITC because it's so objective and so palpable. They have used throughout times the means that we understand best. Now, of course, it's a technological era, isn't it? Well, it's not now. It started dozens of years ago. And that's when they started finding this path of the latest technology. Now voices appear recorded in computers, not only analog computers. So I think these communicators do exist. I now believe that they exist, and they use whatever we are receptive to understand. At these times, it's obviously the new technologies. What will the future bring? I think it depends. It depends on us, really. As I told you, sorry, I'm tired at this hour. My communicators say, we want to speak to everybody in your world interested in our world, theirs. So it depends on us, really, on the receptivity, on do we really want to know, do we really want to get this message? Because they have tried from, if we could speak about Professor Guimarães Andrade, a great friend of mine, a Brazilian master, really, he would say from prehistory with the stones and so on. So they've used the means of the time.
That's right. Anabela, I'd just like to introduce you to Sherry Pearl.
Well, hi, Anabela. And first, I want to thank you for being here with us today and tell you that I've been interested in your work. You were one of the people who I saw, I'm sure, in the documentary Calling Earth, which was one of my first introductions to all of this. But I've been recording since 2016. And I did begin first with human vocal gibberish because that is what was presented to me. And when we are teaching parents now, people are asking about the future of this. And I do see in the United States more of an interest now because so many young people are passing due to overdose and suicide, which is really so sad. But there are more parents wanting and needing this kind of contact than ever before. And so we are teaching this. And I have made a slideshow that's available as a free download at my website, which leads people through the steps on how to configure their own computer to get started recording EVPs. And I just heard from a father 2 days ago who's quite convinced. He's finally contacted his daughter and he's over the moon thrilled. But I also was told what you were saying, that using the human vocal gibberish was suspect to some of the scientists because there are words within it possibly anyway. So I started experimenting with everything from Spiritron and the streams that Keith Clark makes to my own finger just scratching on the top of my computer over by where the mic is, to water running down the bathtub drain. And I found that I could get EVPs from many, many, many sources, but the ones that are easier for people to hear initially before their ear is trained are the ones made with the human vocal gibberish because, plant a radish, get a radish. It sounds more human. I have many clips from my son where I use the electronic streams, which to me is greater proof than using, human vocal gibberish. We got words from what had no words, but he does sound like a robot rather than a human. And so it's not the kind of thing I'd want to send to a parent. So sometimes we just use the human vocal gibberish just to have something that's very human sounding, especially if I'm working, with bereaved parents, because they need that comfort. I think it was August who asked earlier about proof. And the one kind of proof I've seen happen is when, and I don't know how they do it, it was Craig who told me that maybe those who are working with us are using voice recordings of their voices, but we have had children come through in their own voices. Now that's using the human vocal gibberish, and I have a number of mothers who swear, and I have a couple myself. That's when my husband decided I wasn't completely losing it, was when he heard his son's voice and said, well, that's Danny. So I'm not sure how we're going to prove it, because you can't prove things to people who don't want to believe them. They just don't accept it. But of late, not even of late, for a couple of years now, I found, we call them sound sources over here in America. I found a sound source made by Keith Clark that he calls Michael, that I recorded and slowed down quite a bit so that like 10 minutes became 20 minutes. And I was able to hear 100% of the words. Along with that, if I think a question, I hear my question in that, reflected in that sound source. And I can have a back and forth conversation by thinking a question, and then they answer me quite immediately. Very often people who will come through to me will say, give me their full name as it was when they were on the earth and where they came from. So it was very funny because my father's last name was Perlmutter, but he had shortened it to Pearl many years ago. And he'll come through and say, well, this is Herman Pearl from Belmont Avenue, New Jersey. So they'll often identify where they were in their earth life. But again, it isn't proof, because I've also come across imposters who had a very good time playing around with me, saying they were my close friends, and then giving me advice that wasn't, well, let's just put it this way. I woke up to what discernment meant, and I've now learned that you have to be very discerning, because the feeling is so true what August was saying. I can tell the difference just because those who are coming with love in their hearts, I can feel the love, and those who are coming to just kind of I don't know, play with my head, will eventually give themselves away because they'll just not be of such a good nature. But I'm still constantly learning something new. And one of the things I've done that's so fascinating is I was told about these tuning forks, and that there are certain vibrations that are like the angel vibration. And I never took a lot of this seriously until I ran into what I call the leg, which stands for the lower entity group. And now if I'm not certain if I've got like, because this sound source I use, the voice always sounds the same. So if I'm not certain, I just kind of take this and put it up by my, my ear where I'm listening to, and if it's not those of a really fine nature, they'll go, "Oh, Sherry, please stop that." And they'll get inarticulate. And I'll say, "Well, I'm stopping this transmission. That's enough for me." And bam. But it is very interesting about the vibration that I bring to it and who I might connect with. And so I work very hard on taking that part seriously too, and using both music and prayer and everything all thrown into what I call American Girl Shaman. I kind of dance around and lift my spirits before I go on, because I want to be sure that I am not, that I'm putting enough light around myself as to protect myself. That's advice that my team told me, that they actually said that when I am in a really high light, that it puts a light around my line at the North American station and protects me. It seems to be working, but I'll tell you, there's a lot that we're still just learning, and I'm just grateful I didn't run away scared, that I learned how to create a safer space for myself, because there was a time, Wendy knows, I was pretty shook up. So it's very interesting, but I thank you for being a pioneer. It's people like you who paved the way for people like me, and I'm very grateful.
Thank you to you for the words. Yes. Yes, I agree that, of course, I know that very well, that human voices are more conducive to receiving anomalous voices. Naturally, they are made of that matter, isn't
exactly.
it? Well, that I know. I mean, there's no doubt in my spirit, and but I've experimented it many times. What I say is a different thing. I say, first, you cannot present them officially, let's say, right, and convince anybody who is not in the field. And then there is the second danger, which is a great danger, and people are not aware of it, is interpretation. And there, pareidolia gets into it, because even today, I received from Brazil a clip that of a friend of mine. She understood sogra, which means mother-in-law, isn't it? Mother-in-law, sogra. But she must have said sobra, which is too much. Sobra, this is the remaining. So there is using the words as a barrier.
Yeah.
And then you interpret what you want to interpret. This is what I mean. You see, for me, this is me, but that's how I am. As I said again, I was and I am, to a certain point, a skeptic. I am skeptical. So I want hard proof. But my own, I have frequencies that are, I have 4 or 5 radios, 5 now, that are tuned into state emergency frequencies.
Yeah, I really want to try that. See,
but you must know which ones are the state emergency, because in state emergency, it depends on the countries, of course. That's the reason why they are called state emergency frequencies. There are no voices ever,
right?
Unless there is a cataclysm, nuclear war, or whatever. So, so here there are no voices.
Yeah, well, Keith Clark's streams have no voices.
It's not static between stations, no. These frequencies are for state use. Only the state can use them, you see. But since I do not emit, I only receive, I'm committing no crime.
But
Because
Anabela, do you play a carrier in the background when you're listening?
No. No, as I said, a carrier, this is the carrier. The frequency makes noise. It
just comes out of nothing. They don't have anything to be making the noise from. There's no.
No, it's just the frequency of the radio itself that makes zzz.
Right.
But then you can hear that this noise, the noise is when my communicators are working with it, it changes. Suddenly it disappears, suddenly it comes very, very high, then it makes all kinds of different noises which do not belong to that frequency, or it speaks when it does speak.
Wow.
Not always, of course.
That must be so exciting for you, when particularly what you were saying about hearing the conversation move from one radio to a different radio.
To the other, yes. That I had several times here in France, when I lived in France too. Yes, it would start in one, jump into the next, and then into another one, and into another one. Yeah, that was really incredible. Yes.
So exciting. Are there any more ITC conferences planned? Is there anybody who is looking at bringing the ITC explorers together?
Not that I know of, Wendy. I do not know of any.
Right.
I do not know.
Well,
I organized two here.
I know you organized two in Vigo.
Very good ones. Everybody was here, really. Brun, Senkowski, even Olivier Costa de Beauregard, who is was a quantum physicist. Olivier Costa de Beauregard, among the greatest. He came with François Brun, and he was here and gave a talk, Costa de Beauregard, at one of these conferences that I organized. I no longer have the energy for that, Wendy.
I understand completely.
And they,
I
really do not.
No, I understand. You've done your share. You've done your
David, you helped me a lot in these conferences, two big international conferences. We had simultaneous translation into four languages. This cost a fortune, you know.
I know. I know what's involved. Craig and I know very well how much energy is involved in running. Craig's run three or four.
No longer. I have no energy to do such things. No, and David is no longer here, so I can't do it really.
We understand. Luis Sergio had a question. Luis Sergio?
Hi, Anna. Do you think this kind of experiment can be performed in the digital radio?
Which digital radio?
Because I think you use analog radios, as far as I remember.
No, I do not. No. My radios are all digital. They're solid. The matter of fact. All digital, not one analog. That was at the beginning, and they all went kaput. Well, I mean, being night and day on for 10 days, the old valve radios, not one works. I have all digital, very powerful radios also, Johnny. No analog radios.
Anabela, I'm just aware it's nearly 1 o'clock in Spain.
Yeah, I know. So good night.
But we really do appreciate you giving us this time and all of your wonderful experience.
And Karen and everybody and Luis, Sergio and Craig.
We have lots of new friends now.
Thank you, Anabela.
And wonderful to be here with you. If Wendy doesn't have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, so that I can speak at 9 o'clock p.m., we'll will be in these hours.
I'm just so thrilled that we've got four continents represented here today.
Exactly. Yeah.
We've got South America, we've got Europe, we've got North America, we've got Australia. This is what
Wonderful.
we have
True.
dreamed of. Okay. Thank you so much, Anabela.
So good night, everybody, and thanks a lot
Good
for the interest, for your interest and attention.
Bye.
Bye-bye.